The most difficult moment for me in the history of Oxide, when we got our first term sheet. I've been working so hard for so long on getting that, and we were raising a lot of money on nothing. I mean, on a deck, 3 people on a deck. I've been thinking so much about get the term sheet, that when we actually got it, I wasn't ready for what was emotionally on the other side of it, which is like, oh shit, I gotta go do all this. And I don't know how to do any of it. We talk about like how great it is to have a team. We didn't have a team. Yeah. We had 3 people. I didn't know how to build any of this stuff. You know, like I knew how to build aspects of it, but like, oh my God.
You've done a lot of hard things. In fact, I would say out of school, you wanted to work on operating systems and kernel development. Not every engineer's dream, I would say. Like, hey, I'm going to work on the operating system or the kernel, spending time at Sun, and then joined. And now Oxide, that's also a very hard thing to do, where you're actually building a new server and you're integrating software hardware together. So for many people who are out there who would be interested in doing hard things, but may not have that slight push that they might need, do you have some piece of advice?
Piet Hein is a mathematician and poet. And so he's got these little poems that I think are really important to any technologist solving a hard problem. And one of them that I love is, problems worthy of attack prove their worth by fighting back.
Oh, that's beautiful. Welcome to the Software Misadventures podcast. We are your hosts, Ronak and Guan. As engineers, we are interested in not just the technologies, but the people and the stories behind them. So on this show, we try to scratch our own itch by sitting down with engineers, founders, and investors to chat about their path, lessons they have learned, and of course, the misadventures along the way.
Okay, so Bryan, you're the co-founder and CTO of Oxide Computer Company, where you're building a new type of server. We definitely want to get into that, but I thought a fun place to start would be your Twitter description. So you have the Nom-de-Guerre, pardon my French, being the kernel data corruption. How did this come about?
You know, that is a good question. So I think for whatever reason this is when Twitter was, of course, much younger and a lot less serious. Although actually, I guess Twitter has now again become much less serious in a much less whimsical way. So we were kind of talking about what it would look like to have, a Nom-de-Guerre is this idea of, and this is especially when you get these kind of small insurrections where you get these are tragic wars where you have these youth armies that adopt these kind of florid names of war. And we were kind of joking about what it would look like and I think we were arguing between, I think, general protection fault and kernel data corruption. So the general protection fault being a kind of fault on an x86 CPU, and then kernel data corruptions. I think we were in the midst of actually a pretty bad bug. I wanted to say that OS 1028, which is a Jira ticket number. You know when you can memorize the Jira ticket numbers that stick with you? You know what I mean? Like you always want to be like, take someone on there, a software engineer in their dotage, and be like, okay, rattle them off. I know you got them. Rattle off every Jira ticket whose number you can remember. Yeah. Every bug ID, whatever bug tracking system. There's always a couple. And OS 1028 was an absolutely brutal data corruption issue that we had. And I want to say that was about the same time. That would have been like in 2012. And actually I had first encountered Twitter when they were initially a Sun customer way back in the day. This is like 2007.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And so I actually spent time with Twitter in its earliest days because the performance, they had this thing called the fail whale that would come up pretty frequently because they really deeply did not know what they were doing. And
like most companies.
Like most companies, but more so. I mean, I think that you had and this is in 2007. So you kind of set the scene. You have there'd been this huge .com boom and then bust. So the .com boom still, we have not seen anything exactly like it. I mean, of course, this is when I was coming up, when I was first out in Silicon Valley. But, and hard to know if we will ever see something that has that exact complexion again, because there are certain, because in particular, you couldn't, there was no working remotely, right? Yeah. So that dot-com boom was very much was very related to the geography. And I think the analogy that many rightly made is with the gold rush out here in 1849. And one of the things you appreciate about California is this is an omnipresent kind of cycle in California where people kind of rush in, and most of those people leave in disappointment. Or actually, I think that we kind of have this idea that like people get kind of wiped out. I actually think that the results are just kind of like mediocre for people. I think it's like no one is destitute after the dot-com bust, but people also are not looking, are struggling to find work and are moving elsewhere. So you had this kind of big rush out here, and then this big rush out, kind of departing Silicon Valley. And kind of in the echoes of that, the people that were kind of building these new companies didn't really have experience building a service, because the kind of the aptitude out here historically was around that lower part of the stack: semiconductors, network switching, computing servers, operating systems. I mean, like that was kind of that where that expertise was. And so when you had folks that were building an application on Rails, which is what they were doing in 2007, that was not like a Silicon Valley construction, even though they were geographically co-located with Silicon Valley. The level of technical aptitude, they did not have a high degree of technical aptitude. And Jack Dorsey I was super unimpressed with Jack Dorsey.
Not many people say that statement openly, by the way.
Oh, God. More people need to know. He had absolutely no idea what he was doing, but had total confidence. And in particular, he was certain that this was an issue. The Twitter issue was an issue with Sun, which is part of the reason I was there, right? I was there because I was there working at Sun at the time. So I spent 14 years at Sun Microsystems. A customer of Sun's was this company Joyent that ironically I would later go work for. And then Joyent's customer was Twitter. So Joyent had asked me, it's like, hey, can you come in and help them debug these performance issues? And it was taking hundreds of milliseconds to process a request. It was taking the number was like 450 milliseconds, something like that. And I remember thinking how is that even, 450 milliseconds? I'm like, well, okay, obviously there's we just need to find the IO there. I mean, clearly there's that's not compute. Like that can't be. And they're like, no, it's all compute. I'm like, it's all, that's a lot of instructions to execute, actually. And the thing that was neat is we were able to really use some of the tooling that we built, this facility called dtrace, in production at Twitter, to understand pretty quickly what was going on. And Twitter was spending all of their time in memcopy and bcopy. And what was happening was actually a bug in Rails. And Rails, in a pretty hot path, was, instead of, there was this kind of dry idea of don't repeat yourself. And the idea of it was somehow quotidian or pedestrian to iterate over an array by indicating the index from 0 to the bounds of the array. It's no, you shouldn't do that. That is somehow inelegant. What you should actually do is just iterate through the array until you fall off the end of it, and then catch the resulting exception. That's a terrible idea. It's this is one of these ideas that's this is an idea from someone who is very much over their skis, right? This is someone who they think that this is clever because it involves fewer characters or whatever. But just because you can do it doesn't make it clever. And it's did you take a stopwatch to this? Because if you did, you would see that this is really slow, because when you hit that exception path, exceptions should be exceptional, right? And everything about a runtime environment is going to be steering you towards those exceptions being exceptional. And anyone writing the code that deals with that exception is going to be within their rights to be like, hey, this is an exception. Like we got a lot of work that we can only do right now. And in particular, if you want to have any prayer of knowing where this exception comes from, I've got to walk your stack frame right now. I got to walk your entire stack frame, and we've got to actually resolve that symbolically, because that you presumably want that to be in Ruby, not in hexadecimal. And so the B copy that it was doing was the very suboptimal symbol table iterations that it was doing, and copying all this information into this galactic payload that it would then pop up one frame, and then be like, oh great, I ran off the end of the array. It's like, okay, well, you just like, do you realize that you just like burned a forest to the ground to actually figure this out? Like, yeah, next time, like maybe we can use the array beds. But I came out of that experience, and like part of the reason I mentioned the geography, I came out of that experience being like, you need a lot more Manhattan technologists here, because at the time I was spending a decent amount of time in New York, and also very geographically focused, right? And if you were in financial services, like that was all happening in New York, and the level of sophistication in terms of technologists in New York with respect to this problem was incomparable.
Oh, wow.
Like this is because this
money's
looks like
on the line, right.
Yeah.
Money's on the line. Also, like this looks like a ticker plant. Like this is not that complicated. I mean, it is, but this is a problem that has been solved before. And what Twitter need to go do is you need to go find someone at, JP Morgan Chase, at Bloomberg, at Goldman Sachs, at, pick your large financial institution where money's on the line, and you need to convince them to move out to California, and you go solve this problem actually properly, which is ultimately more or less ish what they did, but they got there much slower than they should have, because they had this kind of residual arrogance that like, we must know best. It's like, you really don't know best. You actually don't know what you're doing. And that I would say that kind of inappropriate confidence really came from the top with respect to Dorsey. So I came out of that being like, I am never using this thing ever. Like, these guys are a bunch of jokers. But by 2010, it's like, all right, I actually am going to create an account on Twitter, unfortunately.
There are secondary usefulnesses of it. It's a confidence necessary, but not a sufficient skill to do things well.
I mean, it is definitely a problem. This is part of the reason why I really encourage folks to, I think formal education, it can be a mixed bag. It can be extremely expensive, but part of the reason that I really encourage people to complete formal education, and this is not the only way to get this, but a value of formal education is that you get your ass handed to you. It's really, really important that everybody needs to get their ass handed to them intellectually. And like, if you haven't had your ass handed to you yet, then you simply need to seek out a more arduous domain, or you need to seek out a center for people that are going to attract. You need to go to where the people are who intellectually kick your ass, because that humility is a really important part of your own kind of emotional development from like 18 to 22. And again, it's not the only way to do it. Like, there are other ways to do it. But if you come out at age 22 being like, I understand everything, and I am the smartest person in the room, it's like, oh shoot, we screwed up. Got to go back. Sorry, you got to go to grad school. I don't know what else to tell you, because we didn't do our job yet. And you, at some point in there, from like 18 to your early 20s, you need to have a moment of like almost breakdown, right? You need to have a moment of like, I understand nothing. I am a mouse. I'm not even a mouse, because I don't even understand how mice work. Like I don't, everything all, through up until, I was 18, people are handing me all of these abstractions. And now I've been taking all of these abstractions apart and learning that I actually that there's so much to not know about them. And, the world is so complicated, and how can I possibly ever contribute? It's like, okay, good. Now you're in the right frame of mind for you're in that early 20s mindset. It's like we've that period of time, whether it's formal education or otherwise, has done its job of absolutely breaking you, and now we can rebuild you. So
yeah, that's very relatable. I think that's how I got out of pure math after very fast and realized, yeah, this the game is a bit rigged in a sense, right? That you're only competing on just pure intellect, or that has like such outsized impact on the final result. And I realized, you know what, I think I gotta go find something that's you're competing on like multiple things, where like hard work is like an important vertical instead of just how smart you are.
Sure, but then that whole experience, that like for the rest of your life, it changes the way you carry yourself, right? You're not going to walk into the room being like, well, these are the smartest people in the room, because like actually go back to like that like my abstract algebra class, and or whatever it is, whatever it was in pure math, where you're just like, hey, I'm out. So I think that's an important part of your development.
So interesting. So I think in other interviews, you mentioned so you have teenagers. How are you thinking about like the education path for them?
Everyone's got to find their own path. My kids are, they're going their own way. I'm secretly jealous, or maybe not so secretly jealous, of there are kids that are super into tech at a young age. Like that's the way I was, right? I loved horsing around with computers and writing programs and so on. And that's not who my kids are. My kids have got their own thing going on. And so on the one hand, from a spectrum of a parent, you really do need to encourage kids to go their own way. I think too many parents really put their thumb on the scale, and they create someone who's like later in life miserable, because they're like, I actually, in particular, I definitely worry about this with computer science, right? Where I think that with computer science, there's been so much economic opportunity, which is not the case, by the way, when I was coming up. Like when I was studying computer science in 1992, the country was coming out of a pretty deep recession in 1991. I knew a lot of people that couldn't find work. And certainly you would not study computer science if you were interested in work, because there was this very deep idea that all of that knowledge work was going to be done offshore. That would not be done in the US. It's amazing to me the echoes with AI today. And it was such a deeply held belief, by the way, that I didn't like question that. But I also, this is what I love. I had fallen in love with computer science at that point, and that's what I wanted to go do. And I'm just a big believer in allowing people to find the thing that is going to speak to them at that level. And then you kind of need, as an adult, and this can be really hard, as an adult, you really need to then encourage that. And you need to balance it at some level. But, it's like my oldest, it plays college baseball, right? And that is like, his orientation is 100% around playing baseball. This is obviously insane. I mean, at some level. When he was much younger, I spent a lot of time kind of trying to talk him out of this. And at some point when he was young, 6th or 7th grade, he's like, Dad, I know at some level it's not very realistic, but it's my dream. And when a kid tells you something like that, like that's kind of like that should be a wake up, from when a kid is telling you like, hey, you're like, this is my dream. And it really makes you kind of question a lot of things. And like, in fact, people did try to talk me out of being in computer science. And, I mean, the way that one worked out is I had won the generational lottery, and people were trying to convince me to rip up the ticket. And, boy, that would have been a mistake. So I think when you give advice to young people, as an adult, you very much want them to be able to feed and shelter themselves, but people will figure it out. And I think that you've got to let them find their own way. And you don't want them to enter adulthood thinking like, man, I had this other dream that I really got talked out of. And I let someone tell me to do something that I actually didn't want to go do. And like that, that stuff is like that can really chip away at the way you think of yourself, at the kind of the essence of who you are. And I just think that like people should be able to figure it out on their own. And of course it means like as a result, like that means like there's going to be some big potholes along the way. And as a parent, it's really hard to watch that. But that's also a big part of learning and letting people kind of figure it out on their own. So long answer to the question, but I really think that people need to be given the space to figure things out on their own.
I'll send that to my parents, my Chinese parents, see what their follow-ups are. But sorry, bad joke. They're actually very supportive. They're surprised, like they're very non-traditional in that sense. But anyways.
Well, and I think that and there was this Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom with a couple years ago, and I mean obviously it's like a very different approach. It can be a very different approach, and it's not necessarily, I mean, there are aspects of that I think are like great, of having those high standards and so on. Not that I don't have high standards for my kids, but like my high standards for my kids, I got to tell you, are all around character and decency. There, I am like really like I'm pretty flexible on them finding their own route in life. I am not flexible on how they treat other people. Like that is extremely important to me. I'm not flexible on how they on their own sense of integrity, like not flexible. And they know that. Like they know that like if I'm taking a test, if I'm taking a surprise pop quiz, if I flunk the quiz, like there'll be some level of disappointment. But if I cheat on the quiz and get an A, I will be metaphorically dismembered. Like that will be like not acceptable. I would much rather you like do the best you can. And I do worry that when we emphasize results over all else, that you run the risk of generating adults that don't behave very well. And we got a lot of adults that are not behaving very well right now, honestly. I mean, this is, it's embarrassing how many companies have had really serious scandal and how many companies are, we've got a lot of people who are at Oxide. I mean, it's almost tragic to me, the number of people who apply to Oxide, not because of what we're doing technically, not even necessarily because of what we're doing in terms of organization and so on, but simply because we are a company with integrity. People are like, oh, this is such a relief to have a company that like that talks about that believes in integrity. You're right. That should not be a competitive differentiator. That should be all companies. That really.
Were there specific events in your life that shaped this sort of non-negotiability on integrity?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, there were. I mean, not something I've really talked about publicly, but suffice it to say that like when I was growing up, there were secrets in my house and they were really, really corrosive. And, ultimately my parents are divorced but in my case, that was like great news. I mean, it was very, very much in vogue in the 80s, but in my case, it was like, all right, thank God. People would be like, oh God, I'm so sorry about the divorce. I'm like, no, actually the divorce is terrific. That is actually, and that did for sure shape like I think that I do believe in honesty and transparency. And I think at a very, very deep level, I would rather people be honest about who we are and what we are. And I think trying to create these facades ends up being really deeply corrosive. And, I think that what that facade can be covering can ultimately end up being completely corroded, right? I mean, it's like there's no ultimate like integrity there, and the integrity in kind of like a structural sense, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then when the whole thing comes apart, like there's nothing. And so I guess I've always believed, and probably is forged to a certain degree from having kind of what happened to my kind of nuclear family, and it's just really important to me it's important to me from a family perspective. It's important to me from a company perspective. And I think also, I think the other kind of element that is to me, and this was very much, this does not come out of kind of childhood trauma and much more from just the being instilled in these values from my own parents, the kind of the idea of a societal responsibility in terms of what you're doing and societal engagement, and like you're not your objective in life is not self-maximization. Like you need to serve. Everyone should seek to serve a broader community and society, and what like that element is a very important element in terms of the way, certainly the way I think of myself. It's like I've got responsibilities that are much bigger than myself, and we all do. And I guess it's a sad commentary on our divisive age that's thought of as like old fashioned, but to me, that's really important.
Both the parts that you mentioned, it's important to, in other words, like struggle a little bit to get your ass handed to you. The importance of integrity in this case. How do you go about instilling this within, let's say, for example, your kids or even within the company? Because you can say these statements and they make sense logically, but it's very easy to go take the easier path, which is not necessarily what you want. But then how do you go about encouraging to a point where it becomes practice?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the reality is, that's going to be forged in difficult moments, because that's where like the rhetoric is going to actually meet facts on the ground. It's like we're just talking earlier about encouraging kids to find their own way. That is way easier said than done. If you talk to a parent of a toddler and you say, and this is let's say before toddlers have become difficult. So let's say this is like, you talk to like a parent of an infant, of a 6-month-old, right? And you ask them, what do you want for this newborn that you have? Like virtually any parent will tell you, I want them to be happy. That's what I want. And I mean, they're not going to say like, oh, boy, I want them to get into Bowdoin, or, I want them to like, work for Morgan Stanley, or, they're not going to have these kind of, they're going to be like, I don't know, maybe some truly sociopathic parent would say that. I guess that would be like a true warning sign. Like, actually, I want them to get into Bowdoin. Like, okay, you actually call Child Protective Services. But mostly you're going to get like, I want them to be happy. And I'm like, write it down and put on a piece of paper where you can find it when they're 17 years old and they are doing something that where they're telling you like, hey, I actually want to take a gap year after high school because I'm miserable right now and I don't know like where I'm going. And I want to go work in construction for a year, which is like, the parent that probably aspires for the kid to go to Bowdoin, this is probably going to be something that they're not expecting to hear. And then you're going to be like, go find that piece of paper and listen to that kid, because it's hard. Like that's the moment. Like that's the moment where, it feels like when it feels like the stakes are high. And so, those are the moments in which you really, who you are in those moments of difficulty. And it's hard to say like, well, you need to go through these moments of difficulty, but that is what's important. And you need to then that kind of needs to happen repeatedly where, in that moment of, where the kid is contemplating, do I cheat on the pop quiz or do I kind of like take the low grade? It's like, that's the moment, like that's the decision point. And if you make the wrong decision when it's low stakes, when they're in a 7th grade math class, like that's an opportunity to now like really correct that and say, the kid gets caught cheating on the pop quiz. You can really explain to them like, here's what's important to me and here's what's important to us and here's who our values are. And that moment can kind of shape them. Right. But part of that adolescence is those kind of moments where you can shape that. As people get further and further on, like they're getting more and more baked from a character perspective. I believe very firmly that it's never too late in almost every dimension, right? It's like I have discovered that like in my my junior year that like I was studying chemistry and I'm kind of miserable, but I just took my first computer science class and oh my God, I love it. It's like, it's not too late. It's not too late. You met at a data science boot camp, right? It's not too late to say like, hey, this data science thing is super interesting to me. Like I want to I want to go back and I want to learn about, like, it's not too late. It is never too late to learn something new, learn about a new domain. That said, I think from a character perspective, I don't know if it's too late, but things get like baked, and you get to the point where you've got someone who hasn't necessarily lived with those same ideas, and has been, whether it's taking a shortcut or whether just like losing track of who they are or why they are. Right. I mean, the example that I always use for this is like, Uber was a company that really deeply lost its way. Right. And that came from the top. Right. And Travis Kalanick and the kind of the culture they had at Uber was very, very, very broken in a lot of ways. And there were a whole bunch of things that were like deeply, deeply wrong. And if you go reread like Susan Fowler's, blog entry on her experiences at Uber, what is going through the kind of the mind of the people that she is describing in there? What is going through the mind of the software engineer that is implementing Grayball, this thing that they had developed to evade regulators in Portland, right? Like, how does a software engineer end up there? Like, I don't, probably gradually, but at that point, like, you really need, is it too late for those folks? Like, I guess I believe in redemption, so probably not. But holy moly, do you need to have a moment of like, I am down the wrong path, and I need to deeply correct the way I think of what's important. And how did I? And it's like Anthony Lewandowski, who was at Uber, and Anthony Lewandowski should be in the slammer, right? And was pardoned by Trump, kind of in another like embarrassing moment for tech, where Peter Thiel was lobbying for him to be pardoned. But you look at Lewandowski and the kind of the arc of his life, and it's crooked. He's very bright, but he's deeply, deeply, deeply crooked. And I'm not to pick on him, although like the justice system has already concluded that he's guilty of crimes. So
this is the guy that took stuff from Waymo and then brought it over to Uber.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, he took stuff from Google and he lifted a bunch of Google IP, but that is like just the tip of the iceberg. He very famously or infamously, inside of Waymo at Google, had a safety is job number 2, and they put an engineer in a Prius he on the highway at a time when he'd been explicitly forbidden from doing it, and damn near killed the engineer. And like, and this is where you're talking about like, okay, now we're actually talking about like real lives, real people, real lives, and that is someone whose priorities are really deeply screwed up, and had been deeply screwed up for a long time. Like, this is not something that this is the thing about all of these scandals. Like, it's never a surprise to people who've like known someone for a long time, because it's like, no, you look at that, you can find these like much smaller transgressions a long time ago, when they're growing up, when they're in school, and then when they are, and the transgressions are just getting larger and larger and larger, and nobody is coming in and saying, stop, this is wrong. And I think that in software engineering, it's kind of gutting to me that if you had told me in 1992 that software engineering would be an epicenter for people behaving badly, I think I would find that, I'd be gobsmacked. I think I'd be just shocked by that. I'm like, how? But it's like, unfortunately, like, the good news, generational lottery ticket, right? I mean, there's a lot of economic opportunity, but that economic opportunity has attracted economic opportunists and people who aren't in it for the same reasons that I'm in it. And it shows up in their behavior and misbehavior.
So in this case, like, you said back in 92 getting into software engineering or computer science was not a thing that was very popular. In fact, people would be dissuaded of doing that. It's like, hey, don't do this. This is for someone else, or we'll offshore these jobs. Today it's quite the opposite, and along the way there have been these cycles of culture changes in Silicon Valley, where, like you said, initially it was a lot more about semiconductors and hardwares, and then it became a lot more about just apps on tops, and then mobile and whatnot. Um, you've seen this all the way through. What are some things today that you would want to be different and you would want to bring back, like the, let's say, the old Silicon Valley culture?
Yeah, I think it's well, I really think that it is important to bring back the why. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? And not that, and I don't want to lionize or romanticize kind of Silicon Valley's past, but they're, because I think it was easier then too, in a couple of key regards. But I think it's very important that we have that why. And my big belief has always been, I'm not a huge fan of halt and catch fire. It's a little bit mixed. It's fine. I mean, there are aspects of it that I like, aspects of it that I don't like. I'm not a much bigger fan of HBO Silicon Valley than I am of halt and catch fire. But there is a great line in it where one of the protagonists says to the other, of computing, we are not the thing. We are the thing that gets us to the thing. But computing is not the thing. And I think that's an important thing to not lose track of, that what we are building isn't the thing. It should be the thing that allows us to get to the thing. Now, I think for some folks, you can easily make an argument that okay, but for folks that are at that application level, it's like they're much closer to like the thing, right? And if you are at an Uber or a Lyft, providing mobility for people that don't otherwise have it, like to allow them to do to get to a job or visit a loved one or do the grocery shopping, whatever it is. So I mean, it's easy, I think, in a lot of these to begin to make those connections. But I think it's important that we do make those connections. And I think that is what we lost for a while. I think we have it in pockets, for sure. We don't have it universally. And, I think that there are plenty of companies that don't know why they exist. And there are plenty of people that I actually don't know why I'm doing this. It's like, all right, well, go figure that out. Because I think we collectively do our best work when we have that deep sense of purpose. I understand the need to build a business. I think that's great. I think that there's a danger when that actually drowns out everything else. And I think that when we are only interested in building a business, then it's like, okay, well, what if a shortcut presents itself where you can book this revenue in this quarter, even though it's not sustainable, or you've got these kind of opportunities to take these little business shortcuts that are actually undermining the broader meaning of what you're doing. And when you are only focused on the kind of economic outcome, you don't make the right long-term decision. And I think that's what we have seen, and maybe this is another way of phrasing it. We have seen episodes of absolutely rampant short-termism around here that I think are really problematic. And it's like we actually need to be focused on the long term and on innovating for the long term and on serving our responsibility to society, which is to put these incredibly powerful tools, like the most powerful thing humanity has ever built is computing. I think, I think that you can obviously, like, we have built lots of amazing stuff. Our ability to build a lot of that amazing stuff at its root has our ability to build computing devices. Like, that is what we have needed to build better everything. And I still very much believe in that. And I'm very long humanity. Like, I'm very pro humanity. I think feels like a little ridiculous to say, but I feel that because another thing that I really don't like, that I've seen several bouts of, I don't like the kind of this doomerism thinking, and we have seen it it was offshoring in the 90s. It was Y2K in the late 90s. It was actually, there was surprisingly little doomerism in the dot-com bust because it actually just felt like, well, this is actually doom. Doom is actually here. So it's like, there's no real point in being a doomerist because it's like, we're all living it. And not that there's not legitimate stuff there, especially when you look at things like climate change. It's really important to treat it very seriously. But like, we're going to figure it out. I mean, we actually are going to, and it will be hard, but it will also be meaningful to go figure a bunch of this stuff out. So let's not, I think sometimes we underestimate our ability to figure this stuff out, and that's a real problem.
Well said.
Okay, talking about computing, we wanted to switch gears and talk about Oxide computers. Before we talk about Oxide itself, well, one, why start Oxide Computers?
Yeah, why start a computer company? Yeah, great question. So the origin there is that I have always known that I wanted to start my own company at some point. And just because I felt like it would be something that I wanted to do. I felt like my career would be incomplete without starting my own thing. And not just for building a business, but that too, but also, and especially as I used Sun for 14 years. I was at Joyent for another 9, and Joyent was bought by Samsung in 2016. And I knew that the next stop for me would be doing my own thing. I also knew that I would be doing my own thing with my co-founder, with Steve Tuck. I had worked with, and this is where, getting kind of your earlier questions around, character. Steve and I had worked together for nearly a decade at Joyent, and I felt like our collective character was tested all the time. In a startup, I mean, part of what's interesting about a startup is that like you have there are just crises all the time, right? And those crises really, everyone gets a chance to reveal kind of who they are. And I knew that Steve and I deeply shared principles and values, and that's who I wanted to work with. And we had a great shared values, a shared curiosity and enthusiasm, but also really different experiences. Steve came up on the go-to-market side. I had worked in sales at Dell and at Joyent, and obviously on the engineering side. And I'm like, this is what I want to go do. I want to go do something with Steve. So that's actually what I knew before it was a computer company. Certainly before we had a name, before we had an idea, I had a co-founder and a desire to start something. And we would talk about the things that we wanted to go start. And we had just a bunch of very bad ideas. That's kind of how I would characterize them. I mean, it's just like,
can you share a few that you can remember at this point?
I did promise to Steve that we would never speak of some of these bad ideas again.
Let's call Steve and get his permission.
No. Okay. But I feel that I will not speak of Steve's bad ideas because I will leave those.
That's totally fair. Yes.
I do feel that I can speak of my own bad ideas, though. I feel like that. I feel like but to give you kind of a concrete, so if you have kids, or maybe if you don't, if you do any kind of like recreational athletics, one of the things that you deal with is this program called Team Snap. Team Snap this is just a way for organizing a team, and often used in youth sports, but you'll also use in adult recreational sports. It's free. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. It's like, and like we see these things, right? You see things that are like, and again, often free, often they have forced into extinction something that came before it. So like this is like Craigslist and classified ads, right? Like Craigslist is terrible. I mean, it's just awful, but it's also like just, it can't be dislodged because the price is right. And Craigslist itself is like, we're kind of happy being like bad. Like we actually don't care. Like, well, I guess this is just going to be bad. I guess and I mean, what has actually happened over time is that for different elements of classified ads, different
Yeah,
pieces of
it
it. Pick up,
became different products. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
different products, right? It's like like if you want to sell a car, it used to be that if you sold a car, that would be in the local classified ads way back in the day. Then there was a period of time, like if you want to sell a car, you really had to do it on Craigslist. Like there wasn't really another way to do it. And now if you want to sell a car, there are a bunch of apps that you would go use to sell a car. So fine. But the TeamSnap is one of these. TeamSnap is like the Craigslist for, it's just bad. It does this kind of like and I'm sorry for anyone that works on TeamSnap, but also like anyone that works on TeamSnap, like
Please fix it.
I like no, it's just like, that if there's someone who works on TeamSnap, and first of all, part of the problem is like I don't think there is anyone that works on TeamSnap. So I would almost like love for you to get the letter from someone like, no, I am a software engineer at TeamSnap. It's like, okay, we've discovered one. I think what's much more likely is like, no, they got rid of all their software engineers like 8 years ago. And I just feel if you were talking to someone at TeamSnap, they would say like, oh my God, it is so much worse than you can possibly imagine. This is one of these things where it's like, when it like looks bad on the outside, that it's like way worse on the inside. So I'm sure there are wild stories about TeamSnap. It's like, no, it's like it's owned by this person who's just like, just interested. I mean, they're clearly not interested in delivering a quality experience. And in particular, as someone who, at that time, especially coaching kids in like youth baseball, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could go do that would be delightful. So if you were to take the kind of like the team management piece, there's something called Game Changer, which allows you to follow games online, which is great, right? So you can have like a grandparent can follow their 8-year-old's baseball game, kind of like pitch by pitch. Like that's great. That's a great experience that they can have that was not possible when I was a kid, right? But Game Changer like overly monetizes this and charges a fortune for it, and it's like there's a whole bunch of things that's a mess about that. If you could take like Game Changer and TeamSnap, and then you combine that with like league management, like umpire scheduling and stuff like this. It's like I thought you could like, there's a real problem to go solve there. But this is ultimately a bad idea, right? This is a bad idea for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, this is where you get into like, okay, so it's like you can go do this, solve this problem that would be meaningful, that people would love. But you start doing the math on it, and it's like, how much, there are, and part of the value of this is that you would like want to tightly integrate it to the very kind of specific sports. You'd want to focus, I mean, I know baseball, you would focus on youth baseball, maybe you expand that to youth soccer, but you start doing the math on like, well, how much is there out there and how much are people willing to actually pay for it? You kind of go, what does the sales process look like to kind of a league? And then like, also like how technically interesting is this? Like, is this enough to hold my own attention for a decade? No. Is this enough to be able to, because the other thing I kind of realized is that the best moments of my own career were working with like an extraordinary team. Like I love heist movies, and that like the heist movie is my organizational model. Like that's what I love. I love watching a heist movie. I love being a part of a heist. Like I want the safecracker, the getaway driver, the demolitions expert. I love that, and I love the like, also like keep it weird. This is like, I grew up watching the A-Team when I'm a kid, right? And if you look at the A-Team, it's weird. You've got these folks that are got, B.A. Baracus is afraid to fly. And you've got these folks that are kind of coming from different backgrounds or whatever, but they're all bonded by this mission that they're going to go on. Like, I love the A-Team as an organizational model. Like, that is what I love. But like, you can't, like, you don't call the A-Team for, to go like grocery shopping or whatever. Like, you're not going to have the A-Team, and there was a great, in the 80s for the television show, which was, by the way, of course, much worse than it is in my memory. In my memory, like A-Team, Knight Rider, 1984, watching those two back to back was like, I mean, you would have like, as an 11-year-old, you're just like, I am just absolutely in heaven. I go rewatch those like with my own kids. And in particular, like sat through like the premiere of the pilot of Knight Rider, which I remember as being like a transcendental religious experience. Like I touched God when I watched the pilot of Knight Rider as a 10-year-old or whatever I was. My kids watch the pilot and they're like, dude, we get like 4 minutes in and I'm like, am I watching the right thing? Like this thing is, this is terrible. Like this is so bad. And I remember my kids who were the same age I was when I watched it. My kids, my older was like, Dad, I know this is important to you, but do we have to keep watching this? And I'm like, we do not. We can turn this
Very
off.
polite. Very polite.
I'm super polite. But I'm like, you know what? No, you do not need to keep watching this. This is awful. Yeah, they'd be much less polite to me now as teenagers. They'd be like, bruh, what but so the A team as organizational model though I loved, and in that kind of intro of the 80s A team, they would say, the intro was like, if no one else will take your problem, if you can find them, you can hire like the A team. Like that's what I want. Like I want, if you can find them, if no one else will solve your problem. That's not like a Team Snap replacement. You know what I mean? Like that's just not. That is not an A-team moment. Like that is that, and and there's nothing wrong with that. And like maybe at a different like stage of life or whatever, that'd be totally fine. That'd be great. Like no, I want to go solve this problem, and I'm happy to do it with like 2 people and not 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 for this period. This what hopefully will be multi-decade period. I wanted something that was big, that needed the A team, and I knew I wanted to do it with Steve. And then at the same time, we were enduring these problems at now then Samsung, where we were hitting all of these problems running at scale, and realizing that what we were trying to do, which is to deploy infrastructure on top of Supermicro and Dell and HPE. And we had very sophisticated software, right? Sophisticated software that was at the kind of we had our own OS kernel. Like I've done kernel development my entire career. We had sophisticated software. There are real limits on what you can do, even with arbitrarily sophisticated software, when you don't actually control the entire system. And if you look at what Google and Facebook, Meta, Amazon do, they control the whole system. They are not Dell and HPE and Supermicro customers, right? And you kind of add all of this up, and especially the rejection of the bad ideas, and then I think also the other thing. I mean, in fairness, the other thing that as we were beginning to think about like what we want to go do, and I was reminding myself of the email address of a venture capitalist that I had dealt with over the years, and his last email to me was as a reminder. Like, great getting lunch with you today. As a reminder, I will fund literally anything you put in front of me. And that's important, right? To have that sense. And I think it's actually really, really important for a startup. How would you go big? What would it look like to go big? And what would it look like? What are you afraid of doing? And what does that look like? And I think that because I think sometimes, I honestly think that this is like part of the challenge, part of how I ended up in kind of the Team Snap rut, is ironically focusing too much on the business side of it. Like, what is a product that people will pay for? Yeah. And then you kind of end up with something. It's like, well, this is a product people will pay for, but this is not a world-changing thing.
The upside is pretty limited in that case. Like
the upside is limited, exactly, right. And so it's like, what would you do? So you kind of want, as you're kind of doing the thought exercise of like, what does new company formation look like? And I think it's totally reasonable to have, because this is obviously the route that I took, it's totally reasonable for new company formation to start with, I know the people that I want to work with, and I don't know what I want to do yet. Like that is, to me, that I don't know how often people kind of talk about those very kind of first moments of a company, but there have been a lot of great companies that have been formed exactly that way. That's the origin of Compaq, by the way. You can argue that Compaq is the most successful startup in history in terms of the speed at which Compaq hit not just revenue, but hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, the growth they had. I mean, they hit right space, right time, right team, right everything. But when they were starting Compaq, all they knew is like, we want to do something together and we want to all quit TI. They were all together at TI, and there's a very funny documentary, Silicon Cowboys, where they actually interview Rod Canyon and some of the other founders of Compaq. And I mean, I'm sure this is somewhat apocryphal, but it also feels earnest, where they're like, yeah, we were kind of debating that versus starting like a burrito joint. We knew And like, I think that there's something great about the fact that they knew they wanted to do something together. And so I think that there's a lot of value in kind of coming to the problem that way of what we know we want to go do something together, and now let's go figure out what it is. And then when that VC sent me the email, even though he didn't mean to do it, and there's if you're fans of HBO Silicon Valley, there is, as there are in so many aspects, there's a very funny, unspeakably vulgar scene in the way that Silicon Valley is, but where Richard is encouraged by Russ Hanneman to do the thing that he actually wants to go do, and not doing the thing that you think other people want you to go do, but what is the thing that is like in your heart. I think that is really important, and that can take some time to figure out. But this problem, and again, it was kind of that email back from the VC that kind of catalyzed us. I'm like, Steve, we need to go do. I mean, if we can get literally anything funded, if we take out that fear of not getting funding, let's go do the thing that we actually want to go do, which is start a computer company. And we had endured so many of these problems together that it's like, yeah, we should obviously go do that. But do you think we can actually raise? Do you think we can get it funded? I'm like, yeah, I think so. I mean, this is when I was a dunce and thought that VCs would only, it's like this venture capitalist is only telling us the truth, obviously. The funny kind of epilogue there is that, so I started talking to VCs and realized that like, this is interesting. Like it's contrarian, but the way as a venture capitalist, the biggest outcomes are when you're contrarian and right. And that doesn't mean contrarian and wrong is not great. Right? So you want to be, but contrarian. Well, it's also not terrible, because the other thing about venture capitalists to know is that like zeros are endemic, and a venture capitalist's greatest fear is not a zero, because those happen all the time. A venture capitalist's greatest fear is that they don't fund, they pass on the company that is the next multi-billion-dollar outcome. Like, and this is such a fear that you can go into any VC firm, and in any VC firm, once you kind of get the kind of the Wonder Woman truth lasso on them, it's like, what's the one that got away around here? Because there'll be one at least. And that one will come up pretty frequently because, as they're passing on a company, some partner's going to be like, is this another Pinterest? If we had Pinterest, I worked very closely with a VC firm that had Pinterest had told us, like, we actually want you. We were not going to raise from anybody else. If you get us a term sheet, we're done. Like, we could have had all of Pinterest and it would have been firm making, but they talked themselves out of Pinterest. And it's like, forget the zeros. Like, they forget their own zeros. Like, they don't even know their own zeros. What they all remember is Pinterest, contrarian and right. They all remember, again, those ones that were contrarian and right that came through that were just too contrarian for the firm. And so when you are contrarian, like, that gets VCs interested, like that. And to a degree that it can be really actually its own challenge, is that VCs get too interested too early when you're like, no, we are not a good fit for you. And they think that like you're like negging them, and that you're, it's like, no, this is not a negotiation tactic. I'm not trying to get you excited about Oxide by telling you that you're not, but by saying that you're not a fit. And they're like, okay, but now we're very interested. I'm not literally trying to tell you you're not a fit. And so many of these firms would insist on going deep, and then they would realize like, oh, we're not a fit. We're scared. I'm like, I know you're scared. I know, like, stop it. Like, we're going whaling. You want to fish from the pier. There's nothing wrong with fishing from the pier. Well, actually, they don't even want to fish from the pier. Like, they actually want to go to the fish section in Safeway. Like, that's what they want to go to. And it's like, great. I honor it. That's not what we're doing. We're packing the gear and going on a multi-year voyage to a distant ocean. and the success is very much not assured. But if we can deliver, if it's a win, it's a big win. And so we're kind of discovering that the VCs are interested. Some especially so. The VC that actually sent me that email, though, by the time I actually got back in touch with them, I'd already talked to a bunch of VCs, so I already knew there was a lot of interest out there. And man, I get maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds into describing Oxide. He's like, wait a minute. If you're talking about starting a computer company, I want absolutely nothing to do with it. No.
Everything except hardware and biotech. Then we're out. That's not everything.
No, and it was like, okay, yeah. I'm like, okay. And actually, it was funny because I'm like, okay, one, like, you sent me an email saying that you would fund literally anything I put in front of you, so that's obviously nothing. I mean, he was literally like, don't know what you're talking about. Like, just like, no, I don't. That doesn't sound like me. I don't think I would say that. I'm like, okay, well, you actually did say it. So like, do you want me to send you the receipts? I mean, I got them. And actually, it was funny because I was like, okay, this is a phone call. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Like, bye. And even a VC he's like, no, wait, don't hang up. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. He's like, no. And he did. I mean, to his credit, allowed me to expand on it. And he's like, all right, look, there's no way I'm going to fund this, but I do want to help you out. How can I help you out? Which is this is not unusual or unreasonable, by the way, when people are starting a company talking to venture capitalists. VCs will, if you are off thesis for them in some way, or they just don't want to fund you because they're just like, I'm just not going to fund this idea ever. And in that particular firm's case, they had just lost their shirt on a company that was like not wholly dissimilar, and a company that no one had heard of, which is part of their problem, but was not wholly dissimilar. And so there was no way they were going to fund us because it was just too close to a very recent zero. On the one hand, like VCs, like a zero is not their greatest fear. On the other hand, like they're not in the business to get zeros. And like if they've had and in particular, if they've had a recent zero, they're like, there's aspects of this problem that I am aware of that I would not have been aware of previously. And I actually know how hard this is. And you kind of there's a degree to which like you got to hit that sweet spot of being able to delude yourself into thinking like, I can solve this. If you know how hard something is, you'll never do it, right? There's a sweet spot that you need to hit. With them, it's like they had this very recent failure. But when he asked, and I do tell people that are like, because I know you guys talk to founders and people that are looking at new company formation, if as you're talking to a VC that's asking, how can I be helpful? Have an answer to that question, and know that like the answer to the question is not going to be like, well, fund my company. That's how you can be helpful. Obviously the answer, but because especially if like, look, I like you or I like this idea. It's just, it's not a fit for me. It's like, it's not. And VCs won't always ask, by the way, how they can be helpful, because sometimes they're like, actually, like, I don't like you and I hate this idea. So like, I actually want to get, so fine. They're not going to ask, and you don't need to ask. But if a VC does ask, how can I be helpful? Like, have an answer to that question. And in this VC's case, I'm like, you can be helpful by introducing me to the founders of this company that was zero. I want to talk to them. I want to understand.
Yeah. Interesting.
I want to understand what happened. And that was a very, very helpful conversation. And in particular, at that moment, the thing I was most worried about was that I actually do want to understand technically what I'm getting into. And actually, that particular founder, when I described what we were doing, he was also like a little bit, grizzled. This guy's coming back from the front. He's got the long stare. He's about to like spend the rest of his life being a peace advocate. He's definitely done. He definitely wants to get off. He's fresh off the battlefield. Not to overplay the metaphor, but he's like, what you're describing is a suicide mission.
Wow.
And I remember writing down suicide mission. But he's like, absolutely, you'll never succeed. I'm like, okay, well, this is inspiring. Thank you. But in talking to him about kind of what had happened there, and there were a bunch of things that were interesting there. One of them was the actual mistake that they made which is a mistake that many startups make, by the way, is they thought they had product market fit before they did. So they had a very happy customer building something. Again, this is like Oxide adjacent, right? So they were not actually, they kind of had the vision of doing something that was the size of Oxide, rack scale computer, but that vision had gotten pared way down as they were they were implementing, and they were basically down to something that today you would call a smart NIC, really focused on security. And they had a customer, which is great. They great, we have product market fit, and they built out this pretty elaborate go-to-market team. They actually didn't have product market fit. And what they had was one customer that was great. Even that one customer didn't want to buy that many of them because they were so happy with it. I mean, they're like, I need like 5 of these things. Wow. I mean, I love it. But I don't actually need, I just don't need very many of them. And then like, that was a huge bank. It's like, well, how many of those are there? Yeah. If they need like 5 a piece,
only a handful. Yeah.
It was only a handful. And what they needed to realize, and again, it's hard to do in the moment, it's easier said than done, but like, you actually don't have product market fit. Like, you have some stuff that's promising.
So one thing I want to talk about, what you said.
Wait, can I make a quick joke for some comic relief? So once Oxide goes public, right? Like a few years down the road, and then you become a venture capitalist, and then you have all these people coming to you, pitching you really questionable ideas, and you're like, instead of saying like, oh, the TAM is too small, you can actually tell them the story about the baseball app, everything. I think it's going to be excellent. So I think I would like that much more than being told the TAM is too small. So.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So because you hear like just a VC saying the TAM is too small.
I think that was, so I did a little bit of pitching when I was kind of working on like a startup idea a couple years back, and then so that was like a common thing. It's kind of like the TAM is too small, like we can't invest in it.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that this is where like be helpful for venture capitalists to explain a little bit more about what their own economic model is and the kind of outcomes that they need for their LPs. And because I think also you got businesses where it's like, this is there's potentially a business here. It's just questionable whether it's a venture
or lifestyle business, as they say. Yeah.
Right. And I think that lifestyle business, I think is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I guess
when I first heard that term, honestly, I did not know what that meant. And someone was like, well, it's like a mom and pop shop. And I was like, so like my dad was a businessman, and like he worked really hard. I'm like, so that,
100%.
If you ask lifestyle business, meaning like his lifestyle wasn't easy by any means, like he was working super hard. So why?
Absolutely. Like, what lifestyle are we talking about? Like, we talking about the lifestyle where, I mean, it's like you talk to anyone who's like, running a restaurant or, and I've got just total reference for those folks that are working hard and trying to, provide a service to folks. I think it is like, that lifestyle is like super hard work. I'm not sure what lifestyle we're talking about. Like, I think it's so insane to talk. And I think it's also a disservice, honestly, because when we talk about like, oh, it's a lifestyle business, and you have this idea like, oh, like this is easy. And then when it's not easy, because by the way, it's not easy, people begin to think like, I'm a failure. Like, this is easy for everybody else, and it's hard for me only. And it's like, no, it's actually like hard for everybody. It's actually just super, super hard. It's also really gratifying. Yeah. And there are lots of reasons to do it, but it's super, super, super hard. And actually, it's funny because I was just thinking about this recently. A friend of mine started a company in 2018, and we were talking about raising money. And he's like, "Oh, it's easy. Like, I just think it's easy." I'm like, "It's easy? Okay. I don't think it's easy. Like, that's not the first word that comes to mind." And he's like, "Yeah, I got like venture capitalists basically throwing money at me." And I'm like, okay. And this is a guy with like crazy pedigree. This is a guy where like a VC would look at the resume and be like, I'm funding this. Like, I don't even know. I don't need any other data. It's like, well, you probably should get some. It's like, nope, I don't need it. Like, because, this person, like, super young faculty member at very prestigious institution with like the most prestigious background you can basically have, like in a domain that's hot, right? Like, yes, I'm funding this, no question. So he's like, yeah, this is easy. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it is easy. All right. And I remember at the time telling him, I'm like, be super careful about taking a lot of money, because the objective is not actually to raise money. That's not like the objective is to like have or a good or service that people will pay for. And by the way, your customers don't care at all about your pedigree. They don't give a shit. Like, you can't be like, no, but wait a minute, but this product is the result of our finest educational institutions. And you're like, this product doesn't work. It's junk. You know, it's like the Humane pin or the Rabbit R1. Like, this is like...
Spitting the facts.
And like, I don't care what the pedigree is of the team that built this. And like, that's where it's hard. And so he's like, I think it's easy. I'm like, okay, it's not easy. And I'm like, what happened to them? And it's like, what happened to them is they raised a bunch of money. Then they raised a bunch more money. And we're talking, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the thing is clearly an absolute impact crater. And their last remark is talking about how they are so excited to join name of much larger company. This is what companies always do when they're being acquired, is like, oh, like, we are joining forces with Google. It's like, you're joining forces with Google. Like, I think Google is acqui-hiring, actually. I don't think that, like, I've always wondered, it's like, if you ask Google that question, what's Google's take on this? Is Google like, we are joining forces with this nanoscopic company that no one's ever heard of that took too much VC money? It's like, I don't think that is going to be, that's not exactly going to be Google's take on it. And I guess I kind of admire the optimistic thinking, but that's actually like not what's happening. And it was pretty clear that this was like not a great outcome. There are elements of this problem that are easier. Yes, he's been able to raise venture capital, but like when you raise a lot of VC, you have now VC expectations for a VC level outcome. And now, you know, you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and now you've got a company that wants to buy you for $40 million, which should be great. It's like you've created $40 million for the value. But a VC that is so far below the preference stack, a VC is going to be like, would rather take the zero. Yeah. Right. And would rather not have a deal at all. And then you're trying to do right by your employees. If I think that it's a mess, and it's hard. It's really, 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 really hard. And I think we should not let others tell us that it's easy when it's not easy. It's actually hard.
Yep. So you're building, I don't know exactly how to define it or how to say it, but you can correct me here, but like Oxide racks, which have a bunch of servers in it, I think you call them sleds. Building hardware is super, super hard, as opposed to just writing software on top of it, for example. Were there times where people dissuaded you from actually going ahead and doing it? From saying, hey.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, when we've done our own, so we built a rack scale computer, and this is a rack scale design is something that various folks have taken swings at, but the only people that have really pulled it off are the hyperscalers, are Amazon, Facebook, Google, but it's not in a way that they can actually productize it. So we did our own hardware design, we did our own compute sled design. We're not doing our own silicon, so we're using AMD silicon. We've done our own switch, which was also a huge, it's also very complicated. And then we've done all of our own software from the lowest level all the way up. And there are people that tried to dissuade us at more or less every level of that. For everything at Oxide that we are doing, you can find someone who's like, doing that yourself is a terrible idea. So you certainly on the hardware. I mean, that is like in some ways like that's almost like too easy because it was easy to find folks who are especially in VC who want to that like they like just the margins of software.
Yeah.
And they are kind of addicted to software companies and SaaS companies because they ultimately VCs are funding a company to sell to someone else. And the high gross margins that you get with software companies are something that are very attractive to kind of that next investor. Are you building enduring companies that way? Maybe, maybe not. If you go to Mark Andreessen's Software's Eating the World piece in 2011, and this kind of piece that's hailed as being very prescient, I remember at the time being like, are you kidding me? Of course. I mean, this guy like writes an essay that software is important, and all of a sudden he's like a genius. It's like, it's 2011. It's like, yes, software is important. Like, really? We needed Mark Andreessen to tell us this. All right, fine. But and then I'm like, all right, maybe I'm being a little too hard and like making some important points about like the kind of the shift in thinking. And then you kind of go reread it now, and I'm like, I'm kind of back to where I was when I first read the piece, which is like a bunch of it is obvious, and then a bunch of it is also so what are the software companies that Andreessen tells us in 2011 that these are the software companies that are representative of the new world in which software has eaten the world. Do you know what those companies are?
No.
Zynga, Groupon, Foursquare. You're just like, Zynga, Groupon, and Foursquare. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So somehow, people talk about Fang. I don't hear anyone talking about Zigif or whatever, and not to take anything away, I guess, from the hard work of the folks involved in that, but like those are ultimately easy in, easy out companies. And they didn't build enduring value because, and this is the challenge with software. Yes, it's easy to build software. You can build a high gross margin business. It's actually much harder to build a high net margin business. So gross margin does not consider like the cost of sales. It's like only cost of goods sold, right? It's price versus cost of goods sold. And it's like, oh, we're just going to ignore the fact that we actually had like an enterprise sales team of, 30 people pursuing this deal for 9 months and, going to conferences and all the AdWords and the marketing and all the, it's like, that's all like the kind of that SG&A, all like that, you'll see that in the net margin. Nobody wants to talk about net margin, especially VCs. We like net margin is really important to us at Oxide, and every once in a while we'll get a VC that will mistakenly like leave the door open for my co-founder Steve to go on his extended rant about why actually what you should be focusing on is net margin, not gross margin. And VCs are always like, okay, I actually, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to. Because but net margin is the thing that you should care about because like that's the profitability of the business is net margin. But when you're not trying to build an enduring business, but just trying to kind of flip it to the next investor, you actually care about the metrics that show that growth, which is often gross margin. And you show gross margin and you show growth and you're like, well, this is like an obvious business. And it's like, well, like maybe not, depending on what do these sales actually look like, especially in enterprise software where the sales can be pretty gnarly. So I think in terms of Oxide, in terms of where we had people dissuading us, we absolutely had people dissuading us on hardware because of margin. It's like, no, but margin. And it's like, okay, but if you actually, we believe that we can build a 45 to 50% gross margin business on this. And we think that we can also build we are going to be focused on net margin and we can build an actual profitable business this way. And, VCs that really did their homework came to that same conclusion. But VCs that only care about those kind of software margins, like, no, I don't want to hear anything about software because or hardware because I only want, and we had firms tell us we only fund software. And it's like, you only fund software. Okay. So if NVIDIA comes to you in whatever that would have been, 1999, if Apple comes to you, if AMD comes to you, it's like, so you are not going to like any of these companies that we now rightfully hail. Like people talk like, oh, TSMC and NVIDIA and AMD and Apple, like these companies are amazing. It's like, yeah, what they all have in common?
They're all hardware
Like
companies.
they well, and not just hardware, like software is a very important component of all those companies. But those companies have built systems, and they built hardware and software together. And that is the way. So we for sure had people on the hard, but then even going up the stack, I mean, we had plenty of people who were like, no, you can't do your own hypervisor, or no, you can't do your own control plane. Like you should run, this thing should run ESX, VMware ESX. And we're like, yeah, no, it's not going to do that. Like we are not seeking to, because in part because we knew that if we can't build the whole thing, we actually can't get to that margin that is a viable business because we're not generating the value. You've got to generate, like, you need to generate more value than you capture, right? What you want to do is generate a product where your customers are like, wow, this product is so great, it's worth its price 10 times over. And the price with respect to COGS and the business is something that is viable and sustainable. Like that's a business. And that's what we were, in order to do that, you've got to be able to create that value all the way up. You can't stop it. The hardware is important. It's an important foundation, but you need that software to actually take the hardware and turn it into a real system. And so you really want to design hardware and software together. That co-design is very core to what we're doing at Oxide. But we, ironically, you've got people trying to talk us out of the hardware, and then other people trying to talk us out of doing the software. It's like, okay, no, we actually we're going to do the whole thing. And of course, like we ultimately and felt very lucky to discover our lead in terms of our lead investor at Eclipse Ventures. And Eclipse very much saw no, hardware and software should be built together. And when you get to the right investor, it is great because you're completing one another's sentences. Because we were beginning to talk about the importance of hardware and software together, and they literally stopped us. And they're like, we looked at the 25 biggest companies ever built, and 21 of them involved both hardware and software. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's a good stat. Didn't know that one, but yeah, okay, that sounds good. Good, we're on the same. So they very much shared our worldview. The other, importantly, who else shares that worldview? The actual customers that want to deploy this thing, because they are like the problem that Oxide is solving is the fact that the hardware and software have been delivered by separate entities. So yeah, like you take your VMware ESX and now you got to go buy Supermicro boxes to go, or you're taking, OpenStack and then deploying that on HPE, or you're taking, whatever it is. Like I've got my software's coming from over here, my hardware's coming from over here, and then I've got a switch, I've got a switch operating system, I got a bunch of I've got a control plane software, I've got all this software, I've got all of this hardware. They're not coming from the same entity, and everybody is pointing fingers at someone else when the thing goes sideways. And from the perspective of someone who's deploying infrastructure on premises, and that is extremely frustrating to have, like, boy, nobody seems to have my interests at heart. Like everybody is like, when I'm on a call with VMware, now Broadcom, I'm on a call with Cisco, I'm on a call with Dell, they are trying to prove to me that it's not them and show that it's someone else's fault. It's like, can anyone take responsibility for this problem? Like I'm left as and like, why is no one solving this problem? And I think that like, that is one of the things, you could kind of talk to Sand Hill and the venture capitalists, and they're like, we don't think this market exists, and like, why would anyone solve this problem? And then you go talk to the people that actually have this problem, and they're like, my house has been burning down for 30 years. Like, why is no one calling the fire department? And they're like, yeah, sorry. They think your house doesn't exist. And they're like, what? And so we actually did have some of those earliest folks you're talking to, God bless them. We're very, very grateful for, because when, another kind of question is like, how do you start something that's going to take you so long to build? It took us 3.5 years to build the Oxide rack, the first Oxide rack. And how do you, like, when you have customers for that, what does it mean to have a customer when you don't have a team and don't have funding and don't only have a deck? And like, what you need to, what you are connecting venture capitalists to are not like people that are going to buy your product today. It's people that are going to buy, that see the need for your product and will buy it in, 3 years, what have you. So, but we had let those earliest folks know, and we had a bunch of them who were very interested in what we were doing, that like, listen, like venture capitalists don't think this market exists. And would you be willing to speak with them? And maybe we overshot the mark because customers are like, yes, send them to me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, send me the venture capitalists. And one of the messages we definitely heard from more than one firm is like, yeah, talk to your customers. They're very animated. They're very upset. Like, they're upset. Like they're angry. I'm like, they are angry. They are angry. And like, it kind of felt like they were angry at me. It's like, well, they kind of are angry at you, not you per se, but like the entire capital allocation class. They are disappointed and that they feel like they've been denied modernity and that they are being left to suffer and they're being ignored by everybody. That Dell, Cisco, HPE, Juniper, now HPE, VMware, now Broadcom, like they're not actually interested in solving my problem. They are, in fact, they actually don't really understand what my problem is. They don't understand what elastic infrastructure is. They don't understand what cloud computing is. And they have kind of pitched themselves in opposition to cloud computing. So when I'm fighting them every inch of the way, and no one seems to be giving me what I actually want, which is a product where I can run that elastic infrastructure that I run in the public cloud. I want to run that in my own data center. Is that so complicated? And the answer is like, I mean, no. I mean, it's like, it's not, it's complicated to implement, but it's not actually like the request is extremely reasonable. But people feel frustrated because it hasn't been served, and it hasn't been served for a bunch of reasons. It hasn't been served because existing players, it's not in their interest to go do it. They don't see the whole problem. This divide between hardware and software is really deep. And so this part of the reason that this problem really needed new company formation. And in order to have new company formation, now you got to go do the sandhill shuffle and you got to find a venture capitalist who gets it. And like a lot of them don't. I mean, some of them do. God bless them, the ones that do. And, they when you talk to them, the VCs that get it, which is great, you actually talk to them about like VCs that don't get it. And they're like, no, it's great. I'm glad that I'm the only one that gets it. Are you kidding me? Like, I love the fact that like, in fact, send me entrepreneurs that are solving problems like this, because I love the fact that that others won't fund them.
Less competition.
Like, okay. Yeah, exactly. Less competition. I'm like, okay, but it would be like better for humanity if we funded more of these companies. You gotta acknowledge that. But that's in terms of so it is very helpful. I mean, this is a long answer to your question. Like, did people think we couldn't do it? And yes, at every level. And they would say some pretty discouraging things, honestly. I mean, I had one venture capitalist who, as I was describing what we're doing, stops me. He's like, are you talking about starting a computer company? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. He's like, no, you absolutely, it is irresponsible to your family for you to start a computer company. Wow. You're like, okay, whoa, okay, dude, let me worry about the fam, okay? Like, I think maybe we can dial that down. But he kind of went on this extensive like soliloquy, and I mean, this guy's like a bit of just bluntly like a dick. And actually, the person that made this intro is like, you two are either really going to get along or really not get along. And we definitely are in the not get along category. But now I'm like personally offended that like you think I would get along with this guy? Like, am I a dick? Like, this guy's a dick. Admittedly, of course, the person that made the intro was like, well, no, I was like pretty sure you weren't going to get along. I'm like, okay, this does not feel like that feels like you're backpedaling here. But I definitely did not get along. Not just because of the discouraging words, but then he was like, look, you are never going to get this funded. And I'm like, okay. And, I will acknowledge, like, you understand technology. You don't understand venture capital. I understand venture capital. No one's even going to look at this. And I'm like, okay, well, actually, like, firms are looking at this. He's like, not prestigious firms. I'm like, actually, like, very prestigious firms. And I'm like, and in particular, like, I name dropped, and he name dropped a bunch of names that would never look at this. And I'm like, I'm talking to most of those people. In fact, I've got a meeting with one of those that you just named. Like, we've had 3 different meetings about this. He's super interested. And this guy was like, okay, you should know that my child goes to preschool with his child. I see him several times a week.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, are you accusing me of lying to you? Like, he's like, I will ask him about this. I'm like, you should fucking ask him about it. Like, call him right now. I mean, are you just like, are you? And it was funny. It's like, if somehow it like took that to break through to them, he's like, huh, he's looking at this. And I'm like, yeah, he's looking at this. He's really serious about it. He's like, oh. Okay, well, I'm a small fund. I would love to participate, but I'm like, are you joking? Are you a parody of yourself? Like, are you kidding me? It's like 20 minutes ago, what I was doing was irresponsible to my family. 10 minutes ago, I was a liar, and you were gonna like fact check me at the preschool drop-off. And now you want me to accommodate you, and you're a small fund, and you want to. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I'm actually living HBO Silicon Valley. Like, I'm in it. Like, I'm just like, you people are an absolute parody of yourselves.
That's a great insult line.
So
I like it. I'm gonna start using it. You're a parody of yourself. Oh, that's good. Good.
Yeah. Good luck with that one. I'm not sure how receptive people are. Because then I'd be like, you know what? You're right. I am a parody of myself. I do think that, like, the one thing I do think it's interesting to ask people is, have you watched Silicon Valley? And because an amazing number of people will be like, I can't watch it. I'm like, what do you mean you can't watch it? Like,
It's real.
It's too real. It's like, it's too real. Oh, it's too real. Oh, I'm so sorry. Is the satire too real for Mr. Tough Venture Capitalist? Can't deal with satire. It's like, man, you guys, like, you need to spend a little bit more time in like the mom and pop restaurant, like working the line and like busting your hump. If it's too real to watch like satire, I mean, like, oh my God. But I do think that like, then you do get people who, so I actually find kind of an immediate kinship with people in Silicon Valley who like and watch the show, because to me it says like, okay, you're able to actually like to take half a step away from this, and we are all parodied in that. It's brilliant satire. Everybody in the industry, from software engineers like, come on, every software engineer, you've got some Guilfoyle in you. Every software engineer's got some Guilfoyle in you. Every software engineer's got a little bit of Dinesh. Maybe got a little. You may not like it. These may not be the big, but certainly like Guilfoyle. I think like we all got some Guilfoyle. And it's important to be able to kind of like laugh at that and to treat that as the satire that it is. And yeah, it's like, there are definitely moments that are extremely, extremely real. And like, that's good. That's not bad. I mean, it's actually, I like it. I, watch it with my teenagers, and being able to like pause it and be like, okay, so this actually happened. Like, let me explain how, this, what they're describing is like a very real thing. So.
Okay, on that note, I want to switch gears a little bit. So one thing I wanted to just read off your website on oxide.computer/principles. There's a statement in our mission: kick butt, have fun, don't cheat, love our customers, and change computing forever. And it says right below that this comes from the Scott McNally's quota for Sun Microsystems. And you worked at Sun. Now, if we look at Sun's history, it's been renowned for a lot of innovation. A bunch of products came out of Sun. They open sourced a bunch of those as well. But towards the end, there were certain financial struggles too. Now, coming from Sun, working at that company for, I think, 14 years, what are some of the cultures you want to keep at Oxide, or at least not the same, but be inspired by? And what are the things you want to intentionally change?
That's a great question, and it's a great question because I think many people see the first half of that question. I think is clearer to people of like, oh, and there are things that you clearly want to emulate in Sun, which is true. I think what people forget is like there are also things I don't want to emulate in Sun, and so I actually it's the back half of that question that I people don't see as much, but is also very important to me because Sun did a bunch of things right and did some things wrong too, and missed some opportunities that we're trying to rectify. The things that Sun did right, the thing, and actually it really is embodied. The kick butt had fun. So the motto of Sun was kick butt have fun. So that was and when you went to, I went to a new employee orientation in 1996, and you got, I'm there with the 40 new hires on a Monday morning, and we're watching, the video from McNeely saying kick butt and have fun. Like, this is what we do at this company. So it's like, it was that kind of a mantra. And which, I think for its time was very iconoclastic. The idea that you would have fun at a company was like, that's not the way it was in the 80s, right? Like, that's not the idea that you would love your work and love your colleagues and have fun doing it was very, now we kind of take that for granted. And I believe, you can prove me wrong, but I'm like almost certain that Sun, there are lots of things that were developed at Sun that had influence way beyond Sun that we don't always appreciate. One of them is on the cringier side of things, but started with the best of intentions, is this idea of like corporate April Fool's pranks. That started, I am virtually certain, at Sun. Oh. And Sun and that started in like this kind of, and it was very much this kind of impish idea of like a little bit of engineering mischief, there's some mischievousness that is a hallmark of great engineering, and there's a very clear line between like mischief and malfeasance, yes. Right? And and the April Fool's prank, which was, and then it became kind of like increasingly institutionalized at Sun over the years, and became kind of frankly cringier at Sun, and then sadly escaped Sun, and now any kind of cringy April 1st, some company doing some cringy announcement on April 1st, use like that, you can trace that back to Sun. And by the way, it's so pervasive that if you have something important to say, you actually can't say it on April 1st. There was actually a company that looks a lot like Oxide called Nebula that shut down on April 1st, 2015. And I remember being in the office of my CEO at the time, and he and I were reading this, and I'm like, this is either the darkest and most screwed up April Fool's joke in history. Yeah. Like, no, we pranked you by telling you we were shutting down and laying everybody off. Like, oh, did you believe it? Oh, ha, ha. Like, no. Or this is a company that literally can't even shut down on the right day. It's like, you need to shut down on March 31st or April 2nd. Like, you just like April 1st is just off the menu for shutting down. Like, sorry, figure out a way to, anyway. So that kind of impishness definitely comes out of Sun, became cringier later, but that kind of idea of like having fun at work, but it was deeper than that. And like both the kick butt and the have fun had like, there was actually something deeper that was understood by every Sun employee, but it was really left unspoken until the end of the company. So at the end it was, and what I kind of quote there, the kick butt, had fun, didn't cheat, loved our customers, changed computing forever. That was the actual full expression of what Sun was about. And that, on the one hand, it's like you can be it's a little bit unfortunate that wasn't like completely articulated until the end. On the other hand, people knew that so deeply that it didn't really have to be articulated. So, to take those kind of apart a little bit, like the not cheating was really important for Sun. And you look at, Sun for 30 years, no one went to jail for Sun. There were people who were, people who were, I don't want to say jerks, but like, that's actually like, that was pretty rare, honestly, at Sun. There were people who I really disagreed with, but we were both actually trying to do the right thing. And we disagreed on what the right thing looked like, but there was not really malfeasance. There was not, and Sun did not cut corners. There were not financial scandals. There was not an option backdating scandal. There was not, like, the company was really pretty squeaky clean in a lot of, I mean, squeaky clean relative to its own age, especially relative to the age that came after it. So that was a very big deal. Loving our customers was really, really, really important. And it took me years to really appreciate this. But the reason that Sun did not perish in the dot-com bust is because we did love our customers, and our customers loved us back for it. And customers viewed us as an entity that they could trust. And that trust is really, really, really important. So because I think that, customers would tell us, I love the fact that, like, when Sun comes in here, they don't try to pretend that this isn't their problem. They can they'll own the problem. And I mean, there were counterexamples of this, but in fact, I had one customer tell me of a particular counterexample of this where Sun had, like, really, had incorrectly chased a brutal quality problem called the eCache parity error. But the fact that, like, the customer was telling me about this tells you that, like, how exceptional it was. And it was indeed a horrifying story. And the Sun did not know what was causing this problem. Just to finish the story, Sun did not know what was causing this problem, and was doing things that companies shouldn't do, but do when they've got a problem they know is important that they don't understand. What you should do is say, I don't fully understand this problem. Here's what I'm doing to understand it. I don't fully understand it. People think that customers don't want to hear that. And I mean, admittedly, like, a customer would rather have the problem resolved. Yeah. Like, a customer's not like, you know what I would love to hear? I would love to hear you have no idea what's going on. Like, that's what I would love to hear. It's like, nobody, like, wants to hear that. But if you have no idea what's going on, customer would really appreciate the transparency of, like, okay, I get you don't know what's going on, but you are trying to understand what's going on, and here's what you're investigating. Companies don't do that generally. They generally will confidently tell you it's something that it's not. So Sun didn't engage in this as much as a lot of others did, but, like, this is what was so frustrating about being a Dell customer. Dell does this all the time. Dell spends all their time trying to find something that they can blame on the environment. And, Sun was not immune from this. And as one customer was relaying to me, they were seeing this really serious CPU defect, and Sun was didn't know what was going on and was trying to blame everything. And they're like, well, we think it might be because of vibration in the data center and your proximity to a tube station. To the tube. This is in London. And, like, it was a quarter of a mile from the tube. There is not, I don't know how familiar you are with London, but, like, you are always a quarter of a mile from the tube in London. Like, that whole city is vibrating by that standard, right? So it's like, go fish. And they're like, well, we think it's, like, actually there's dust in the data center. And so there was, like, there had been some dust issues. Was that directly connected to the problem? Sun had no evidence for that, but wasn't saying that. Customer, like, spent, like, £1 million doing a totally new HVAC system to make the data center very clean. But the problems persisted because the problem wasn't due to the dust, right? In an effort to save the customer, they were invited up to the factory in Glasgow, Scotland, that actually made where this machine came from. Customer goes in and sees this environment where this big server comes in and is deboxed and is then burned in the same room. Deboxing creates a ton of dust. And, like, you cannot debox in the same room that you're going to run infrastructure if the objective is to minimize dust. And this is like a bunch of Sun top brass there. Customer, as they described, ran their finger along one of the surfaces, looked at the finger. Of course, it's, like, black with dust. Customer pointed the finger to the executives and said, I paid £1 million for what exactly? And I was like, wow. I'm like, I bet. What was the reaction? He's like, oh, people were ashamed. Like, people were there. You could hear a pin drop in there. And I mean, that is kind of like, on the one hand, the fact that Sun got this kind of wrong for so long, that's a real problem. But that kind of moment of truth, we were talking earlier about these like difficult moments, like that's a difficult moment. And Sun realized at that moment, like we're down the wrong path here. And so, and ultimately that problem, by the way, was like 6 different problems, including this would manifest itself as this, and there were a bunch of things that were wrong with this, but architecturally it would always manifest itself as an eCache parity error. But there were many root causes, one of which was our SRAM manufacturer had an impurity in their process, and there was radioactive boron in the SRAM cells. So like that's bad. It's an alpha emitter. You can block alpha particles really easily, but not if they're in the SRAM cell. They can't be. It's like in the room. That was just one of the problems. There were many. There were signal integrity problems. There were architectural problems. There were software problems. There's a whole, like, basically you could view everything that was wrong with Sun's engineering at the time through the lens of that eCache parity error. And I think that also highlights, bluntly, something that I've been tried to be very first principles in our engineering approach. Sun was first principles at times, but was not first principles at other times. This is an example where they were very much over their skis. So those are like elements that I very much want to emulate. Sun empowered innovators, which I loved. There was a moment when McNeely actually came to speak to the kernel group. This is when I was like, I'd only been at the company for a year or two, kind of starstruck, the CEO of this 30,000 employee company that was there. And someone was asking him about like the coffee machine or something, being like, the coffee machine is terrible, needs to be replaced. Something that felt like, okay, I don't know, like, what do you
That's not the
I
first
guess
thing
the CEO, you've got to endure all. Yeah, it was like a slightly bigger complaint than that, but it was basically like a complaint about something in the organization. And McNeely's response was like, look, I don't know who you think I am or what you think I can do, but I'm not a magician. I don't have a wand. It sounds like you've identified a real problem there. Fix it. Get it fixed. And I remember thinking, like, being a bit struck at the time about someone who would so willingly kind of give up their authority, delegate their authority, to say basically, because what he was implicitly saying there was, I trust your judgment. I trust your judgment that the problem that you've identified is real, that the solution you've identified is valid, and I trust you to get it fixed. Get it fixed. And my expectation is that I don't want you suffering inside. I don't want you waiting for me to fix that. Like, the way to get that fixed around here is to fix it. And I don't think I realized how idiosyncratic that was until after Sun. And I don't think I realized how powerful that is. And the great things that Sun was able to achieve all stems from that trust that Sun implicitly had in its innovators. And which is like, not to say that there wasn't friction and churn and a bunch of other things, but not to be to overly romanticize it, but ultimately, Sun trusted its folks. It found the best folks and trusted them. And there is that's a reason why people will say I did some of, many people will tell you that they did some of their best work in their career at Sun, and it is because of that. That is very much what I want to recreate at Oxide. And we have recreated at Oxide. That sense of we're going to spend a lot of time and energy finding the right people, and we're going to trust them. I trust your judgment. You're here because I trust you. And my expectation is that if something is broken, you'll fix it. And that has generated something that is powerful beyond us as individuals. So that's a lot of what Sun did right that I wanted to emulate. But there are other things that Sun struggled with. And Sun loved its customers, but didn't always generate the products that really reflected that love. And in particular, like Sun would, I think too often would generate would drop kind of a bag of bolts off at a customer and be like, good luck with it all. And well, yeah. And I think that like not always, And the vision would be great, but sometimes Sun would like lose patience with the execution. Not always, but there were a couple of things that Sun was way ahead on, but took its eye off the ball. Sun took its eye off the ball, ultimately did the right thing with respect to open source, but should have open sourced the operating system in like 1999, not 2005. The obviously had the right thing with respect to Java, but was too late to open that up, I think. And then invented some wild technologies. There's something called Sunray, which was this technology where you would have a workstation that basically had a smart card reader, and your graphical session was on the actual server. So when you plug the smart card in, that local client served only as a frame buffer. And you can view this as kind of like really revisiting the mainframe and its distributed terminals, but in a modern, at the time, this is like 2002 kind of fashion. And man, the demo of that thing was jaw dropping, because you would be playing a video, whatever, you'd have all this stuff up, and you would pull your smart card, and then you'd go to the next station, put your smart card in, all comes back up right as you left it. And we still don't have anything that's exactly like that. And, there are fields that should have been revolutionized by this, right? We should have this should be every hospital today. Every nurse or doc should have that smart card around their neck. They should plug it in. They should be able to, it's like they shouldn't have to be on a tablet or their phone. Like they should be
have your laptop around in a way. Basically, you just need a screen.
Exactly. But this is where Sun, great idea, that Sun lost patience with the execution on, and lost patience on the execution at exactly the wrong moment. And in particular, this is like every airline kiosk should be this, but this is in order to win the airline kiosks. And this is again in the early 2000s, this is like 2005, maybe. They really needed to have USB printing, which is a pain in the ass. It's like awful. And who wants to go deal with this thing if you don't have to? It's like, well, we actually needed to do that if they had done that, because American Airlines was going to go deploy new kiosks. Everyone was going to follow American. And American was looking at Sunrays versus a bunch of other things, and ultimately didn't deploy Sunray because they couldn't get the USB printing wasn't happening. Sun was just kind of disinterested in USB printing. And to me, the larger issue there was had the love for the customers. And the reason I know this story is because of the SEs and the solutions engineers that were in Chicago dealing with American at the time. But we didn't always connect it all the way back to engineering. We didn't always connect everything. Connect sales with solutions engineering, with support, with engineering, with marketing, and kind of holistically point at these problems. And as a result, you end up with it can feel to a customer like this is interesting and innovative, but chaotic. And it's like, oh, you've done all this amazing thing. You can't get USB printing to work. It's like, that's the only thing that I need. And then and as I go, so go all of the airlines behind me. And it's like Sun just couldn't summon the attention span to go do, and to a certain degree, it was kind of it was too chaotic. And so, kind of the question that we have in front of us is I don't want to have that problem. I want to be sure that at Oxide, when you've got a customer that has a feature request, it's like, oh, I love this, but here's this thing that I need. I want to be sure that we as a company and as an organization have the disposition to get that problem solved. And because I think that if you can do that, if you can take not just this extraordinary foundation, but get that level of polish and finish on it, you can do something extraordinary. Because this is kind of the level of polish and finish that an Apple might do, but you're doing it based on the feedback from someone who's actually deploying it. you deliver something that's much larger than yourself, because from a user's perspective, it's like, oh, this is awesome. Like I was missing this piece, and they added the piece. That was like, they
Yeah.
listened to
You
me.
just love that.
Yeah, they listened to me, and I had an impact on where this company went. And it's like, man, I love that, and I want us all to love that feeling. And I think as a company, we've hired carefully to get folks who want to be engaged with how the technology is used and get real wind in the sails from that kind of customer experience. And we feel really, really lucky that our, so because the other, when you got these, there was years ago, there was a motto contest in Silicon Valley, and which I love, and actually the winner was Quality is Job 2, which is a play off Quality is Job 1 from an old Ford motto back in the 80s. And Quality is Job 2, of course, like, haha, like that's, there's definitely some truth to that, unfortunately, in Silicon Valley. But the actual second place finisher was truer to me. The second place for the motto contest was God bless the early adopters. And man, that is something I feel in my marrow, because we rely on the early adopters. You know what I mean? Like the technologists that will suffer, that will be in pain. I mean, I know you had Kelsey on here a couple of times talking about those early days of Kubernetes, right? When Kubernetes was a god awful mess. And I mean, I actually dispatched one of our engineers. This is like in 2015. I'm like, I think, I'm interested in Kubernetes, like go experiment with it. Like, let's see what we find. And he came back. He's like, no one is using this, and I feel I can prove it. Like the documentation is so wrong in so many different regards and so contradictory that I have to be the first person that's ever tried to use this thing. Like this is to say this is unusable is to understate it. Like this is so. I think but we need those early adopters. We need those folks that are willing to suffer with a technology when it is really immature. So as a company, you're always looking like we are looking for those early adopters, and we want to deliver them a delightful experience. And I think we've been really focused on that at Oxide, and it's been great to get, we started shipping just last year, but we have, getting more and more and more of those early adopters, and, watching them realize like, oh, this is potentially transformational for me. Like I'm going to be able to do some really new things, or just like watching their own love for what we have done and appreciation for just the beauty of it, which is something we've really focused on. I mean, beauty and the data center are not something that have really been in the same sentence, but that's something that we've really focused on, and to like watch our customers really resonate with that. And I feel like, God, normally I would be totally circumspect on saying this, but I feel like I can kind of say it out loud now. So Toby, who's the founder and CEO of Shopify, had this tweet last week talking about.
I saw that. Yeah.
Oh man, did you see that?
It was amazing.
Whoa, that
must have felt good.
Oh, that felt real good. That felt real good. Yeah. Because it obviously felt great just because, like, obviously we love Shopify. Yeah. We love what they're doing. Love their technologists. It was great to get it to get the rack. Everything, all of the specifics about it are great. But there's something much, much larger about that, about a customer that's excited to be a customer, and that a technologist that's excited to use your technology to go solve a different problem, a problem that, going back to, that I was, VCs thought I was being irresponsible to my family by solving. It's like, those are kind of like the bookends, you know what I mean? Those are the bookends of like, what you're doing is like irresponsible to your own family, and you've delivered something. You've delivered this beautiful machine, and that hey, and I love the way he phrased it, like, hey, if you want to come work on this thing, like, come work for
Oh
Shopify.
yeah, yeah.
And
This is beautiful.
oh
Oh,
man, yeah. So like,
did you see his second tweet? It was like just watching a server do server things is kind of just beautiful. And he had this console dashboard of sorts on the terminal, just showing like how much CPU usage you have, etc. Like just seeing the CEO of a company actually appreciate pieces of technology and not just like, hey, here's a
oh,
fancy app, but no. Here's the actual machine running the software, and seeing the appreciation
it,
for that was just beautiful.
oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and like, just obviously really deeply grateful about kind of all aspects of that. Deeply grateful for a company that's buying a product. While it's still early. I mean, again, this thing has been in the market but we've got plenty of customers like, we've been in the market for a couple of years. Like then come back. But it's like, okay, well, I hope we can. I hope we're around. The but to sort of have a customer taking their own kind of a risk, but then to be willing to talk about that publicly. I mean, it's just like it's so deeply gratifying and deeply gratifying to everybody at Oxide. Like that is something that, we've all been working so hard on this for so long, and to be able to deliver that and to have someone talking about it in that way is meaningful at a level that's really hard to express. It is very, very, very deeply meaningful.
Yeah, totally. Well, we have way more questions to go through than we'll have the time for today. And this has been an awesome conversation. We hope there's a round two. We hope you come back. We would gladly ask you a bunch more questions.
We purposely saved the shouting in the data center for a second
What
episode.
is that?
I think we can't do a proper interview without mentioning that. So,
Yeah.
But one thing which I will ask before we let you go is you've done a lot of hard things. In fact, I would say out of school you wanted to work on operating systems and kernel development. Not every engineer's dream, I would say. Like, hey, I'm going to work on the operating system or the kernel. That's not what most people say. It's actually one of the hardest things to do. Spending time at Sun and then joined, and now Oxide. That's also a very hard thing to do, where you're actually building a new server and you're integrating software hardware together. So for many people who are out there who would be interested in doing hard things, but may not have that slight push that they might need, do you have some piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that hard things are hard. I mean, you don't want to, and we have found this at Oxide that we have had people that are interested in the idea of working at Oxide, but when you actually get to the specifics of actually like building this thing and getting it working, it's like horrifying. You know what I mean? In terms of like the level of detail and like how hard it actually is. And one of the things that we did as this kind of a part of our own hiring process, if we have someone who we think we're interested in, we will open them, allow them to get into what we call our requests for discussion, RFDs. These are our design documents.
Oh, I've seen that on your website, by the way. That's amazing concept. I mean, you see these documents internally within a company, like RFCs, requests for comments. I actually like RFDs, requests for discussions. Honestly, I like that take a lot. And just seeing all of these discussions out on your website, amazing.
Yeah, and it's we opened a bunch of them up, so you can go see a bunch of them that are public. We've got a bunch more that we need to open up. But so when we have candidates, we open them, all of them. So but if you just look at the RFDs that we've got that are public, people will get a flavor for them. And like, you will read these things and you'll be like, God damn, there's a lot of detail here. Like, this is complicated. Yeah. I mean, there's a level you're just like, holy, okay, they've like thought about a bunch of stuff, but this is like, and if you dig deep enough on any one of them, you'll get to the limit of our own thinking, and you'll see like, okay, this is like they thought about some stuff. There's still some open questions here. So I think that the part of the reason we do that is because to show people like, yeah, this is hard. It's very, very detail oriented. It's hard work. I think that we do I would like to believe that this is changing, but this kind of like Instagram culture of showing people the result without the hard work and then pretending that it wasn't hard. Yeah. Pretending that it was easy. I think we do all of ourselves a huge disservice when we talk about how easy it was instead of talking about how hard it was. And there's Ben Horowitz, the venture capitalist, that wrote a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I mean, there's aspects of the book that I think are a little ridiculous, but there's things that I definitely like. And in particular, like, this is a company, he was at a company that was going public to make payroll. And while he's on the road show to go public to make payroll, his wife has a really serious health problem. And he gets a call from his father-in-law, and his wife is basically in the hospital. And it's like, that's hard. That's hard. That is what the kids say. I will say this. I do have a great deal of faith in Gen Z, in part because my own kids are Gen Z. They're the kids of Gen Xers. And I love how, like, part of the lexicon of Gen Z is like high praise is like, that's tough. That's tough. And it's like, I like that. That's good. That's good. There's some Gen Z slang. I also love Riz, by the way, as a verb is like
Riz.
phenomenal.
Actually, I've never heard that.
Wait, what does that mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah. This happens. So yeah, you are obviously millennials. This is where millennials realize that, like, yeah, you're sorry, you're actually aging behind you. No, so Riz, and I should be saying, this is like, I've got the unfair advantage. I got teenagers, and the way I came across this delightful word is I lead the kids scout troop, and one of my fellow adult leaders was talking to two moms in the troop, and one of the teenagers turns to the other, but very much within my earshot, and this is talking about his father over there, talking to these two women, adult leaders, moms. He's like, look at that guy, the Rizzler. I'm like, the Rizzler? What is the what? And so, and I'm like, and I was texting him later. I'm like, Paul, I don't know, like, what if this is praise or not, but you should know that the kids are calling you the Rizzler. The Riz is derived from charisma. So to Riz is to be charismatic. So if I'm rizzing you up, I'm flirting with you, and the great thing about this is, like, it's a power of English in terms of the different parts of speech you can. It's like it becomes a noun. Like, you're the Rizzler now. You're so Riz is great. Anyway, I love tough as a Gen Zism because it's like, that's tough, and as praise, I think that's good praise to have. I think that we need, like, the hard things are hard, and expect them to be hard. And when you're doing the right kind of thing, because the problem is punching you in the face and you're still moving forward. One of my favorite Piet Hein is a mathematician and poet who would have these little, that I love, right? I love it when you get people who are both technologists and artists at some level, because, like, the art has a different resonance with people who are technologists, and Hein is a mathematician, or was a mathematician, so has that. And so he's got these little poems that I think are really important to any technologist solving a hard problem. And one of them that I love is, problems worthy of attack prove their worth by fighting back.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes. And another one he's got is and I won't quote it, can't quite quote it, but things take time, TTT. And just to remind yourself that things take time. Problems worthy of attack prove their worth by fighting back. So when you've got a problem that is punching you in the face and pushing you down, that's a problem that's worthy of attack. And it's hard, and it's easy to say, like, oh, like, you should, like, get back up. But it's like, it's perfectly reasonably like, yeah, I know, I have been getting back up for the last 30 times. But like, this 31st punch, it's like, I actually want to lie down for a while. And, like, that's also understandable, right? And it's like, you also, like, you need to get the wins under the belt. But when you get that win, when you grind, and then, like, you nail the bug, or you get the thing, and you solve the hard problem. By hard problem, to me, a hard problem is one that you didn't think you could solve at some level. And clearly, different problems will be hard for different people, right? So this is another thing that's important, is that, like, hard is relative, not absolute.
Oh, yes.
And, like, and there is value in solving a hard problem, even if it's easy for other people. Like, even if it's easy for other people, like, cook yourself a meal. It's like, no, I don't know how to cook. It's like, cook yourself a meal, even if it's a mess and it's easy for someone else who's got a lot more experience in the kitchen. There's something gratifying there about like, wow, I didn't think I could actually cook myself a meal, and this is actually pretty good. Like, why am I doing DoorDash again? Like, this is actually good, And so like, when you can drive yourself, and in the technical domain, when you can drive yourself to solve a problem, like I actually legit did not think I could solve that problem, and I did it. It's important to get that win, because then you do get the confidence of like, okay, I know this is possible. Actually, I know I can do this. And then you start getting more and more of those wins. I personally, we talked about kind of the A team as an influence for me. I love that when you are working on a team solving a hard problem, the thing that is extraordinary about that is that when you might be having your own moment of low confidence of like, God, I don't know if we can solve this. And in comes your colleague and has the insight, solves it. And you get that moment of like, oh man, thank God we are on the same team. And God, I hope I can return the favor one day. And then you return the favor one day. And it's like, oh man, that is lightning in a bottle. Like, that is magic. And when you look at the times in the history of the industry where people have done extraordinary things, it's because they've solved hard problems as a team. So, I mean, that to me is what I would kind of, the other recommendation I would have for people is like, don't solve hard problems by yourself. Go find someone else you can solve it with. And that feeling you'll get from solving it together, that's unparalleled. And, you start adding that up and you will get an increasing amount of confidence, and you will pick on bigger and bigger stuff. And by the way, by picking on bigger and bigger stuff, like, you will have the most difficult moment for me in the history of Oxide, this is kind of crazy. The most difficult, and it took me kind of like years to really talk about it, because I felt like I felt a bit embarrassed about it when we got our first term sheet. So we got our first term sheet, and I've been working so hard for so long on getting that, and we were raising a lot of money on nothing. We didn't even, on a deck, 3 people on a deck. We get that term sheet, and I was not braced for it at all. I've been thinking so much about get the term sheet, that when we actually got it, I wasn't ready for what was emotionally on the other side of it, which is like, oh shit, I got to go do all this. And I don't know how to do any of it. We talk about like how great it is to have a team. We didn't have a team. Yeah. We had 3 people. I didn't know how to build any of this stuff. I knew how to build aspects of it, but like, oh my God, I have just like, there was a level of terror that was pretty deep. And, I have confided more or less absolutely everything in Steve, in my co-founder, but like, I felt I had a responsibility to him to not confide this sense of terror. That may have been a mistake in hindsight, because I think it would have been fine, but I just couldn't quite bring myself to be like, by the way, I'm terrified. Because he'd be like, what? It's like, okay, well, like, get over it, because like we just raised a bunch of money together with the idea that you could go build this or build a team to go build it. So like, you got to go build it, pal.
Not the right moment to be terrified.
Right, not the right moment to be terrified. It's just like, we just took off, and like, the pilot has told me like, hey, by the way, I've got a pathological fear of flying. It's like, what do you mean you have a pathological fear of flying? Did you want to talk about that? Like, when we were at the gate, like, why has this not come up? Like, we're now like, well, we're flying now. Oh, wow. So, but fortunately, and this is where, you'd had, and I can't remember which one of you had mentioned this, but talking about the podcast about how your mom was listening to the podcast. I thought it was great. Yeah, that was great. Okay. I love that because, I think that, we rely on our parents for different things at different times. And, you need certain things out of your parents when you're, a kid and a teenager. But when you go into adulthood and have your own kids, it's like you need different things out of your parents. And, I'm super grateful to my mom because I was talking to her like during I was like almost catatonic, which was weird for me. I was not something I'd ever really experienced of like, I'm sick to my stomach. I'm so gripped by fear about this. And my mom was like, you've done things like this before. You've done hard things before. Like, you'll do it. And I'm like, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about, which is true. I mean, she definitely did not know what she was talking about. Like, my mom doesn't. I'm like, Mom, you actually don't know. Like I appreciate the sentiment, but like seriously, I'm out of my depth. But I actually had the kind of the wisdom to not argue with her and be like, you know what, she actually is right. And I can't do it. And then it's like, importantly, you get those first wins. You get, in those early days, just getting employees to come join us. And, our first engineer, Robert Mustaki, getting Robert and I talked about Oxide a lot for like, a year prior. I've worked with Robert. I'd hired him out of college. I've worked with him there's like every reason to believe that Robert was going to come join us at Oxide. But it's also like plenty of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily. And so, just Robert coming aboard, like, oh, thank God, they're now, and then getting those, like those next hires and then beginning to like, okay, figure out how we actually, and I remember actually one of the earliest RFDs I wrote was on the RFD process because I'm like, I feel I can write about this. There's so much about the specifics of the problem that I still don't understand, but I can actually make the concrete progress of talking about how we're going to talk about it. You know what I mean? And like just getting that as a win and feeling like, okay, I did something today. And that I think is what's really hard is when you're working on a hard problem, you have these days where you feel like, I don't think I did anything today because I just like came up with this, this little spoon at the granite kind of face and like kind of beat the spoon at it for a while. I can't eat, like, there's not even a mark here. The spoon is dinged up. I got to go like get another spoon or whatever. It's like, what am I doing? And like, you need to find ways to get the little wins. And then with the little wins, you get the wins are a little bit bigger, and then the wins are a little bit bigger. And I think that, you always have to celebrate the wins. You want to be grounded about it. And that's not the time to go on Instagram and be like, oh yeah, by the way, like, start crazy, but it's like, no, you can know like, this is gratifying because it's hard. This is gratifying because we got this win and it was hard. And those moments of gratification build on one another. And, when you're at the point where, your customer, the CEO of a customer is tweeting about your product and how they love it, like, that is extraordinarily gratifying. But it has come only after this extremely long progression. And I don't want to sugarcoat like what that process looks like because it's long and it's arduous, but you can do it. One can do it. It's one foot in front of the other. And, that is and just making that the kind of the energy involved in attacking the problem is energy well spent, even if you're not always seeing it in the problem itself. Problems worthy of attack prove the worth, I find.
That's beautiful. Well, as you were describing this, I have like 15 more questions in my head, but I'm going to restrict myself and save them for another time. This has been an awesome conversation, Bryan. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. We'll link to everything we discussed today in the show notes to the Oxide's website. You have an amazing blog and a bunch of talks as well. We highly encourage people to check it out. We'll also link the photo that Toby actually shared on Twitter.
That'd be great.
I think that's beautiful. Definitely worthy looking at. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really love your approach with the podcast. Love that your moms are listening to it. And I love one of the things you'd said in an earlier episode is just doing your own homework on, and I love that about the questions that you ask. It's amazing how many folks don't do that, but really, I certainly did my own homework on you coming into this. But the really thoughtful questions shown in the results here. You guys, you're having terrific conversations. A lot of fun to listen to just as a listener.
Oh, thank you. That
so much,
means
right?
a lot. That means a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to being back at some point for all the questions.
Oh yes, for sure. We'll take you up on that. We promise.
All right. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the show. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and learn more about us at softwaremisadventures.com. You can also write to us at hello@softwaremisadventures.com. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.